What would you give up to save a stranger's life? Imagine this. You're a doctor, dedicating every ounce of your soul to healing others, when one split-second decision rips your entire world apart. Your career, your passion, your future, gone in a heartbeat. That's the gut-wrenching reality Dr. Emily Harper faced when she sacrificed everything to save a wounded veteran. But the very next day, 5 sleek luxury SUVs pulled up outside her modest apartment. Who were these mysterious visitors? What did they want with her? Step into Emily's storm-soaked shoes. A journey of loss, courage, and a jaw-dropping twist that will leave you breathless. Now picture this. You've lost everything, but on a rain-drenched road, you spot another life hanging in the balance. Would you stop to help, risking even more, or drive on? Too shattered to care? Comment 1 to stop and help, or 2 to keep driving, and let's see what you do. For more heart-pounding stories like this, hit that like button and subscribe to daily narrated stories. Getting to 1,000 subscribers is a huge milestone, and your support truly keeps us going. Thank you for being part of this journey. You're not just a viewer, you're family. The fluorescent lights of Pineview Medical Center buzzed faintly, casting a sterile glow over the linoleum floors as Dr. Emily Harper wrapped up another punishing night shift. At 43, her auburn hair, now flecked with silver, was tied back in a loose bun, a reflection of 16 years of tireless service in emergency medicine. Her hands, steady despite the fatigue etched into her bones, jotted down final notes on a chart, her voice soft but resolute as she briefed the incoming team. Mr. Thompson's BP is holding at 11876, she said, her words measured, though exhaustion weighed on her like a heavy coat. And Mrs. Ellis needs her insulin adjusted at 7 o'clock. She's been trending high. Emily had a rare talent for spotting the tiniest signs of distress, a faltering pulse, a fleeting grimace, a gift her colleagues dubbed her healer's intuition. But to the hospital's new administration, it was a liability, a challenge to their rigid cost-cutting policies. As Emily shuffled toward the break room, her scuffed sneakers squeaked against the polished floor, the sound bouncing off the empty corridor walls like a haunting echo of her fading resolve. Her mind wandered to her lifelong dream, a free clinic for the city's poorest residents, a vision sparked by the memory of her mother's death when Emily was just 10, unable to afford the treatment that could have saved her. She could still see her mother's frail hand reaching for hers, her voice a whisper as she said, "You'll do great things, my girl." That dream had fueled her through countless sleepless nights, but tonight, it felt like a cruel mirage, slipping further away with every step. The weight of her exhaustion pressed down on her, her shoulders slumping under the burden of years spent fighting for others while neglecting herself. She thought of a patient she'd treated years ago, a young mother named Clara, who'd come to the ER with a severe infection, unable to pay for antibiotics. Emily had stayed late, advocating for her, even dipping into her own savings to cover the cost. Clara's tearful gratitude, "You gave me back my life for my kids," had cemented Emily's resolve to open that clinic. But now, with her career on the line, that memory felt like a taunt, a reminder of what she might never achieve. Dr. Ramesh, her longtime mentor, intercepted her just outside the break room, his brow furrowed with concern. Trailing him were Karen from HR and the hospital's new director, Mr. Vincent, a steely bureaucrat obsessed with slashing expenses. "Emily, we need you in conference room C," Karen said, her voice unnaturally bright, masking a storm brewing beneath the surface. Emily's stomach twisted, a premonition of disaster settling in her gut as she followed them, her heart pounding like a drumbeat of dread. The conference room was icy, the air thick with unspoken tension, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. Emily clutched her chipped coffee mug, a gift from a grateful patient's family, inscribed with healers mend hearts, as if it could anchor her against the dread pooling in her chest. The mug had been a thank you from a father whose son she'd saved from a near-fatal asthma attack, a small token that had become her talisman on the hardest days. Her heart sank as Vincent spoke, his tone as cold as the room, each word a shard of ice. "Last night, you used cardiosynth on Mr. Daniels. That drug isn't on our approved list under the new budget restrictions." Emily's fingers tightened around the mug, the rough edge digging into her palm. a sharp reminder of the reality she faced. Mr. Daniels was in a cardiac crisis. He's 80, with a history of heart failure. I had to act. Her voice cracked, the memory of Mr. Daniels' labored breathing flashing in her mind, his eyes wide with fear as he'd whispered, "Don't let me die." She'd acted on instinct, knowing every second counted, but now that instinct was being weaponized against her. "You overstepped," Vincent interrupted, sliding a thick policy manual across the table with a deliberate, almost menacing slowness, the sound of the binder scraping against the wood like a judge's gavel. "We monitor, document, then act, only with undeniable proof." His words were a condemnation, a dismissal of her expertise, and Emily felt a surge of anger, her chest tightening as she fought to keep her composure. Emily's voice trembled with a mix of anger and disbelief, her chest tightening as she fought to keep her composure, the weight of 16 years of service pressing down on her. By then, he'd have been dead. "I've never lost a patient I could save in 16 years, and I wasn't about to start now." She thought of the countless lives she'd touched, the children who'd hugged her after she'd stitched their wounds, the elderly patients who'd called her their angel, the families who'd sent her cards every Christmas. Dr. Ramesh averted his gaze, his silence a sharp betrayal that cut deeper than words, a knife twisting in her heart. She'd always seen him as a father figure, the one who'd guided her through her residency, who'd celebrated her first successful surgery with a proud smile. His refusal to speak up now felt like abandonment, a confirmation that she was truly alone in this fight. "We're terminating your employment, effective immediately," Karen said, her voice softer as she handed Emily a manila folder, her eyes flickering with a hint of sympathy that did little to soften the blow. The words struck like a thunderclap, the room spinning as Emily's world crumbled. 16 years of saving lives, of holding hands through grief, erased in an instant. She thought of the late nights, the missed anniversaries, the patients who'd called her their guardian angel. All of it vanished. Her mind flashed to a specific memory, a little boy named Tommy, whose leukemia she'd helped treat, staying by his bedside through his final chemo session. His mother had sobbed in her arms, whispering, "You're our miracle." Now, that miracle felt like a lie, a hollow promise she could no longer keep. As she emptied her locker, a faded photo of her late mother, a spare stethoscope, a bundle of thank you cards, her hands shook, the weight of her loss sinking into her bones like a cold, unyielding tide. She traced the words on a card from a teenage girl she'd saved years ago. "Thank you for giving me my mom back." The girl, Mia, had been 15 when her mother was brought in after a car accident, her body broken but her spirit fierce. Emily had worked through the night, coordinating with surgeons, refusing to give up even when the odds seemed impossible. Mia's gratitude had been a beacon on dark days, but now it felt like a cruel reminder of what she was losing. Tears stung her eyes as she tucked it into her bag, the hospital's stark walls closing in around her, their sterile whiteness a reflection of the emptiness she felt inside. Outside, a tempest roared, rain lashing the pavement as she stepped into the parking lot. The sky was a bruised, furious gray, the air heavy with the scent of wet asphalt, each raindrop a needle against her skin, as if the storm itself was mourning her fall. She climbed into her aging sedan, the engine sputtering as she drove away from the life she'd poured her heart into, the hospital's lights fading in her rearview mirror like a dying star. The drive home was a blur, the rain hammering her windshield in a relentless rhythm that echoed the chaos in her heart. Each thump a reminder of the heartbeat she'd fought to save just hours ago. Her tiny apartment, already a financial strain on her doctor's salary, now loomed as an impossible burden, its peeling paint and dripping faucet a cruel reminder of her uncertain future. She pictured the eviction notice that would inevitably come, the landlord's stern voice echoing in her mind. "You're 3 months behind, Emily." Her dream of a free clinic, the fire that had kept her going through endless shifts, felt like a taunt, a fading ember in a sea of despair. Her phone, dead in her purse, left her cut off, unable to call her brother in Colorado, her only family, the one person who might understand the depth of her loss. The silence in the car was suffocating, broken only by the thump of the wipers and the raw sobs she couldn't suppress, each one a release of the grief she'd held back for hours. She thought of her mother's funeral, the way she'd stood alone at the graveside, promising to make a difference. That promise now felt like a chain, dragging her deeper into despair. She replayed the meeting in her mind, each word a dagger that pierced deeper with every recollection. "You overstepped." Vincent's voice rang in her ears, detached and unyielding, as if her years of expertise were meaningless, as if she were nothing more than a line item on a budget sheet. She thought of Mr. Daniels, the patient she'd saved, his weak smile that morning as he'd squeezed her hand in gratitude, his voice barely a whisper. "I knew you'd pull me through." Was it worth it? Doubt slithered in, cold and heavy, wrapping around her heart like a vice. Maybe she'd been too impulsive, too naive, too caught up in her ideals to see the consequences. Maybe she'd thrown away her career for nothing, a reckless act that would leave her with nothing but regret. The thought churned her stomach, a bitter taste rising in her throat, the taste of failure and self-recrimination. She gripped the steering wheel, her knuckles white, trying to banish the doubts, but they clung to her like a shadow she couldn't outrun, whispering that she'd never be enough, that she'd let everyone down, her patients, her mother, herself. To avoid the storm-snarled main roads, she turned onto Willow Lane, a desolate stretch cloaked in darkness, the trees swaying violently in the wind's grip, their branches creaking like the groans of a wounded animal. That's when she saw it. A battered pickup truck on the shoulder, its hazard lights flickering weakly through the downpour like a dying heartbeat, a faint SOS in the night. Emily's pulse quickened, her healer's instincts roared to life, a primal urge to act, to save, to make a difference. But a whisper of fear held her back, a voice in her mind that sounded too much like Vincent's. "You're not a doctor anymore. What if you fail again?" Her hands trembled as she slowed down, the rain soaking her jacket as she stepped out, her dead phone useless in her pocket, a cruel reminder of her isolation. The air was thick with the scent of rain and pine, the wind biting her cheeks as she approached the truck, each step a battle against the storm and her own doubts. A faded "Honor Our Veterans" sticker on the bumper stirred a deep sense of duty within her, a call she couldn't ignore, even now. Inside, an elderly man slumped over the wheel, his body still, his face a mask of deathly pallor that sent a chill down her spine. "Sir, can you hear me?" Emily shouted, pounding on the window, her voice hoarse as the rain plastered her hair to her face, the cold water seeping into her bones. She yanked the door open, the rusted hinges groaning in protest, a sound that echoed the strain in her own body. The dim interior light revealed a man in his late 70s, his face pale as death, a Korean War veteran cap on the seat beside him, its faded embroidery a testament to a life of service. His breathing was shallow, his skin clammy, classic signs of a heart attack, a diagnosis that hit her like a punch to the gut. Emily's training kicked in, her hands moving on autopilot, but the absence of tools hit her like a physical blow. She had nothing, no defibrillator, no meds, just her hands and her knowledge, a meager arsenal against the ticking clock of mortality. She eased him into the passenger seat, her eyes catching a worn dog tag around his neck, a small detail that made him feel painfully human, a man with a story, a family, a life hanging in the balance. "I'm a doctor," she said, the words tasting like ash on her tongue, a lie that burned as she spoke it. "I'm going to help you." But as she spoke, a memory flashed. Another patient, years ago, a young veteran she'd lost to a heart attack because the hospital lacked the right equipment. The guilt of that failure surged forward, threatening to paralyze her, but she pushed it down, focusing on the man in front of her. She began chest compressions, counting under her breath. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. As the rain battered the truck, each drop a ticking clock counting down the seconds, a relentless reminder of the fragility of life. His wallet slipped from his coat, revealing a military ID. Robert Mitchell, age 77. "Stay with me, Robert," she pleaded, her arms burning as she maintained the rhythm, each compression a battle against her own exhaustion. The irony seared her. Fired for saving a life, now breaking the law to do it again, practicing medicine without a license, a crime that could land her in even deeper trouble. The thought ignited a fire in her, a blend of defiance and desperation, a refusal to let the system win. But as the minutes stretched, 5, then 10, her body screamed in protest, her shoulders throbbing with a pain that radiated down her spine, her breath coming in ragged gasps, and sweat mingling with rain on her skin, a salty sting in her eyes. Still, she refused to stop. Robert's life hung in her hands, and she wouldn't let him down, even if the world had turned its back on her. She thought of her mother's words again, "You'll do great things, my girl," and clung to them like a lifeline, a reminder of why she couldn't give up. Not now, not ever. As she pressed on, a memory of her mother surged forward, her frail voice whispering for help as Emily, a powerless child, watched her slip away, the hospital room's beeping monitors a cruel soundtrack to her grief. Her hands faltered, trembling, the weight of that failure threatening to break her, a tidal wave of guilt and shame that crashed over her. She could almost hear her mother's voice, soft but firm. "Don't give up, Emily. You're enough." Tears streamed down her face, mixing with the rain. As she pushed harder, her resolve reignited by the echo of her mother's belief in her. She couldn't fail Robert, not like she'd failed her mother all those years ago. The memory of her mother's final moments was vivid. The sterile smell of the hospital, the coldness of her hand, the way her eyes had held a quiet trust in Emily, even at the end. That trust had driven Emily to become a doctor, to fight for every patient, to never let another family feel the helplessness she'd felt. Now, in the storm, with Robert's life in her hands, she felt that trust again, a ghostly presence urging her forward, giving her the strength to keep going despite the odds. 10 minutes into the compressions, headlights pierced the storm, a lifeline in the darkness, their golden glow cutting through the sheets of rain like a beacon of hope. Emily waved frantically with one hand, never breaking her rhythm, her voice raw as she shouted into the night, the wind stealing her words but not her determination. A young couple pulled over, their faces pale as they took in the scene, the woman's eyes wide with terror, the man's hands shaking as he clutched his phone, his knuckles white with fear. "Call 911, Emily yelled, her words nearly swallowed by the wind, her throat burning from the effort. "Tell them we've got a man in his 70s in cardiac arrest." The man nodded, his voice quivering as he spoke to the dispatcher. "They're 40 minutes out. There's a crash on the interstate." The news hit Emily like a physical blow, her heart sinking as she realized the gravity of the situation. 40 minutes was an eternity in a cardiac arrest, a death sentence for Robert if they didn't act fast. She looked at the couple, their faces a mirror of her own fear, and knew they were her only hope. Emily's heart plummeted, a cold dread settling in her chest, the kind of fear that made her hands tremble even as she kept up the compressions. 40 minutes was an eternity. Robert wouldn't survive that wait, and she knew it. She made a split-second decision, her voice steady despite the panic clawing at her, a calm born of necessity. "We'll take him to Pineview ourselves. It's 20 minutes if we hurry." "Will he make it?" the woman asked, her voice trembling as she helped Emily move Robert to their back seat, her hands shaking as she supported his limp body. "Not if we wait," Emily replied, her tone grim, the weight of her words heavy in the air, a stark reminder of the stakes. The couple's car sped through the storm, the man driving with a white-knuckled grip while his wife assisted Emily in the cramped back seat, the smell of wet clothes and fear filling the small space. "I'm Emily," she said between compressions, her arms screaming in protest, the pain a constant companion now. "I'm Noah, and this is Lily," the man replied, his voice taut, his eyes flicking to the rearview mirror as if he could will the hospital to appear faster. "What else can we do?" Lily asked, her voice small but determined, her hands hovering over Robert as if she could somehow help. Emily's eyes caught a pill bottle that had fallen from Robert's pocket, its label worn but legible in the dim light of the car. "He's on blood thinners," she said, recognizing the medication, a complication that could worsen his condition with internal bleeding, a risk that added another layer of urgency to an already dire situation. Her mind raced, calculating the risks, the added urgency fueling her focus, her training kicking into overdrive as she weighed the possibilities. As they neared Pineview, Robert's breathing stopped entirely, his chest still beneath her hands, a sudden silence that sent a jolt of panic through her. Emily's heart lurched, panic threatening to consume her, a wave of fear so intense she nearly froze. She tilted his head back, giving 2 rescue breaths, the taste of rain and fear bitter on her lips, before resuming compressions, her movements frantic now, driven by desperation. Her back ached, her hands shook, but she refused to stop, her mind screaming at her to keep going, to fight for him. "Come on, Robert," she whispered, her voice breaking, tears welling in her eyes as she thought of the life she'd already lost today, her career, her purpose. "I've lost everything today. I'm not losing you too." The words were a vow, a promise to herself as much as to Robert, a refusal to let death win this time. A faded photo slipped from Robert's wallet as she adjusted his position. 4 young men in military uniforms stood beside him, their faces stoic but proud, a snapshot of camaraderie forged in the crucible of war. A note, yellowed with age, read, "Come back to us, my love. We're waiting, Margaret." The words struck Emily like a blow, a reminder of the family waiting for him, a wife who'd held on to hope through decades of uncertainty. "Margaret needs you, Robert," Emily said, her voice thick with emotion, tears mingling with the rain on her cheeks, the weight of that love giving her new strength. "Your family needs you to fight." His eyelids fluttered faintly, a spark of hope that drove her on, a sign that he was still in there, still fighting alongside her. The hospital's emergency entrance loomed ahead, the same doors Emily had left in disgrace hours earlier, their glass panels reflecting the storm's fury. Now, she was back, not as a doctor, but as a desperate woman breaking every rule to save a stranger. What she didn't know was that Robert Mitchell wasn't just any veteran, and his sons weren't just any men. Her choice to stop on that stormy road was about to rewrite her destiny in ways she couldn't fathom, a twist of fate that would turn her darkest day into a new beginning. "I need a crash cart and a cardiac team, now," Emily shouted as Noah helped her rush Robert through the ER doors, the glass sliding open with a hiss, the sound a stark contrast to the chaos outside. Her drenched jacket gave her an air of authority, though she no longer belonged here. The hospital's antiseptic scent a bitter reminder of her fall, a smell that once meant home, but now felt like a betrayal. The night staff, unfamiliar with her, moved swiftly, their actions a blur of urgency, their voices a cacophony of medical terms that felt both familiar and foreign to her now. A nurse reached for Robert's wrist, but Emily didn't stop her compressions, her hands moving on instinct, a rhythm she'd performed countless times before. About 30 minutes in cardiac arrest, on blood thinners, no meds given in the field, she reported, her voice steady despite the exhaustion pulling at her, a professional calm that belied the storm inside her. "I've been maintaining CPR since finding him unresponsive." She glanced at the nurse, a young woman whose eyes widened in recognition, a flicker of respect passing between them before the chaos resumed. Dr. Carter, the on-call physician, appeared, his brow creasing as he recognized her, his expression a mix of surprise and concern. "Emily, weren't you just fired?" She cut in, still counting compressions, her voice firm despite the tremor in her hands. The physical strain now a constant ache that radiated through her body. "Doesn't matter. His name's Robert Mitchell, Korean War vet, late 70s. The team took over, moving Robert to a trauma bay with precision, their voices a low hum of medical jargon that faded into the background as Emily stepped back, her body trembling, the weight of 30 sleepless hours crashing over her like a tidal wave. Her jacket clung to her skin, the cold fabric a stark contrast to the heat radiating from her overworked muscles, a heat that felt like fire in her veins. Her arms felt like lead, her breath shallow, and the adrenaline that had kept her going faded, leaving her hollow, a shell of the doctor she'd once been. She leaned against the wall, her legs threatening to give out, the hospital's fluorescent lights blurring as exhaustion took hold. A harsh voice sliced through the chaos, as sharp as the storm outside, cutting through the haze of her exhaustion. "Emily Harper." Mr. Vincent stood at the nurse's station, his face contorted with fury, his eyes narrowing as he took in her soaked appearance, his gaze a mix of anger and disdain. "You no longer work here. You cannot be performing medical procedures in this hospital." The words were a slap, reigniting the pain and anger Emily had tried to bury, a fresh wound on an already battered heart. Lily stepped forward, her voice fierce, her hands clenched, her small frame trembling with indignation. She saved that man's life. He'd be dead without her. Her words were a lifeline, a reminder that Emily wasn't alone, but Vincent's response was swift and merciless. "She's practicing medicine without a license," he snapped, his tone icy, his gaze flicking to the security guards nearby, a silent command that sent a chill down Emily's spine. "I'll have to report this to the medical board." The threat hung in the air, a dark cloud over her already shattered world, and Emily felt the ground shift beneath her, the weight of her actions crashing down on her. The injustice hit Emily like a tidal wave, her legs nearly giving out as the reality of her situation sank in, a crushing weight that threatened to break her. She'd lost her career, her purpose, and now faced legal consequences, all for doing what she was born to do, for following the oath she'd taken to save lives. The room spun, the lights blurring as tears welled in her eyes, a mix of exhaustion and despair that left her reeling. She thought of her mother, of the vow she'd made at her grave to never let another family suffer as hers had, a promise that had defined her life. Had she failed her too? The question echoed in her mind, a relentless torment that made her chest ache. Noah steadied her with a hand on her shoulder, his touch grounding her as her world threatened to collapse, his presence a quiet strength in the storm. "We saw everything," he said firmly, his voice a steady anchor. "She's a hero." His words were a balm, a small spark of hope in the darkness, but Emily couldn't shake the fear that this was the end, that she'd lost everything for nothing. Dr. Carter emerged from the trauma bay, his expression unreadable, his scrubs slightly rumpled from the chaos, a stark contrast to his usual calm demeanor. "Emily," a word in private. Her heart plummeted, a cold dread settling in her chest, the kind of fear that made her stomach churn. This was it. Robert hadn't made it, and she'd failed him, just as she'd failed herself. She followed Dr. Carter to a small room, the walls a stark white that seemed to close in around her, their blankness a reflection of the emptiness she felt inside. Her legs felt weak, each step a struggle against the exhaustion and fear consuming her, her body screaming for rest even as her mind raced with worst-case scenarios. She braced herself, tears welling up as she prepared for the worst, the image of Robert's lifeless face haunting her, a ghost that refused to let her go. She thought of Margaret, the woman waiting for him, and the guilt threatened to swallow her whole. In the small room, Dr. Carter sat across from Emily, his expression serious as he clasped his hands, his fingers tightening as if he were bracing himself for her reaction. "Robert had another cardiac event during treatment," he began, his tone heavy, each word a weight on Emily's fragile heart, a hammer striking at her already shattered resolve. She closed her eyes, tears spilling over, the room shrinking around her as the words sank in. She'd failed him, just as she'd failed herself, and the weight of that failure was more than she could bear. "But we stabilized him," Dr. Carter continued, his voice softening, a note of hope breaking through the gloom. "It's still critical, but he's fighting." The relief was immediate, a flood of emotion that left her gasping, her hands gripping the chair to steady herself as the tension drained from her body. Relief flooded her, so intense she gripped the chair to steady herself, her nails digging into the fabric, the pain a grounding force in the whirlwind of her emotions. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible, the words a prayer of gratitude, a release of the fear she'd held so tightly. "No, Emily, thank you," Dr. Carter said, his eyes meeting hers with sincerity, a rare warmth in his usually stoic gaze. "The paramedics wouldn't have made it in time. You gave him a chance." He paused, his voice softening further, a hint of regret in his tone that mirrored her own. "But Vincent's right, you're not staff. I can't let you stay in the treatment areas." The words were a bitter reminder of her reality, a victory tainted by the loss of her place in the world she'd once called home. The victory felt hollow, a bittersweet moment that left her aching, a hollow triumph that did little to fill the void in her heart. Emily nodded, retreating to the waiting room where Noah and Lily waited, their faces a mix of concern and hope, their presence a small comfort in the storm. "He's alive," she told them, her voice empty, the words tasting like ash, a hollow victory that couldn't erase the day's losses. "For now." Lily hugged her tightly, her embrace warm against Emily's chilled skin, a moment of human connection that brought fresh tears to her eyes. "You were incredible," Lily said, her voice thick with emotion, her eyes shining with admiration. "I was just doing my job," Emily said, then corrected herself, the words a bitter reminder of her new reality. "My former job." The correction stung, a reminder of the identity she'd lost, the purpose that had been stripped away. The couple bought her coffee, the bitter warmth a small comfort as they sat in the waiting room. The hospital's hum a distant backdrop, a reminder of the life she'd once been a part of. As they talked, Emily learned they were newlyweds. Noah a librarian, Lily a social worker, their lives just beginning even as hers felt like it was ending. "What you did today," Noah said, his voice earnest, his eyes bright with sincerity. "That's the kind of person I want to be, someone who puts others first." Emily managed a faint smile, though it felt forced, her heart still heavy with the day's losses, the weight of her uncertain future pressing down on her. "Just don't lose your career for it," she said, her voice tinged with a bitterness she couldn't hide, a warning born of her own pain. She thought of the dreams she'd had for her own future, nights spent planning the clinic, imagining the lives she'd save, the families she'd help. Now, those dreams felt like a distant memory, a life that belonged to someone else. As the night deepened, the couple left, promising to stay in touch, their departure leaving Emily alone with her thoughts, the waiting room's silence a stark contrast to the chaos of the past few hours. She sat in the waiting room, the plastic chair hard against her aching back, and faced the reality of her situation. No job, no savings, and a potential lawsuit looming, a trifecta of despair that threatened to crush her. The hospital's clock ticked relentlessly, each second a reminder of the uncertainty ahead, a countdown to a future she couldn't predict. She thought of her apartment, the rent she couldn't pay, the dream she'd held for so long, a dream that now felt like a cruel joke. It all felt so far away now, a distant hope in a sea of despair, a light she could no longer reach. She closed her eyes, trying to find some semblance of peace, but the weight of her losses was too heavy, a burden she couldn't escape. At 2 a.m., a familiar nurse, Sophie from the ICU, spotted her, her face lighting up with recognition, a small spark of warmth in the cold night. "Emily, what are you doing here?" "Waiting on a patient, Robert Mitchell," Emily replied, her voice barely above a whisper, the exhaustion evident in every word. Sophie's face softened, her eyes warm with empathy, a kindness that made Emily's throat tighten. "The vet? He's in ICU, stable for now. He woke up briefly, kept asking for the angel who saved him." Emily's throat tightened, the words a balm to her wounded spirit, a reminder that her actions had mattered, even if the world didn't see it. "Just doing what I had to," she said, her voice cracking, the weight of the day's events threatening to overwhelm her. "Not everyone would," Sophie said, her voice firm, her eyes shining with admiration. "And what happened with your job? It's wrong. We're all talking about it." A commotion at the entrance shattered the quiet, the hospital's stillness broken by the sound of heavy footsteps. 5 men in crisp civilian attire, their military bearing unmistakable, strode in, their presence commanding the room. They spoke to the receptionist, who pointed at Emily, her heart racing as their eyes locked on her. At the same time, security guards appeared, likely called by Vincent to escort her out, their radios crackling with static. A shadow loomed behind her, and for a moment, Emily froze, her breath catching in her throat. Who was it? Vincent, the guards, or someone else entirely? The tension hung thick in the air, a question mark that kept her on edge. The tallest man stepped forward, his voice deep and authoritative. "Are you Emily Harper?" "Yes," she replied, too drained for fear, her body heavy with exhaustion. "The woman who was with Robert Mitchell tonight." Behind them, the guards closed in, and Emily stood at a crossroads, unaware that her life was about to change forever. The men turned to the guards, their voices low but commanding. "We need to speak with her, alone," the tallest man said, his tone leaving no room for argument. The guards hesitated, their uncertainty palpable, as Emily's mind raced. Who were these men? What did they want with her? The security supervisor cleared his throat, his voice tentative. "Miss Harper, Mr. Vincent has requested you leave immediately." The tallest man turned, his posture stiffening, a quiet intensity radiating from him. "And you are?" "Hospital security, sir. This woman no longer works here and isn't authorized." "This woman," another man interrupted, his voice sharp, "saved a man's life tonight. Perhaps you don't know who Robert Mitchell is." The guards exchanged uneasy glances, their confidence faltering. "We're just following protocol," the supervisor said, his voice faltering. "Protocol," a third man repeated, his tone laced with disdain. "The same protocol that got Ms. Harper fired for saving a patient yesterday." Emily stared at them, stunned. "How do you know about that?" "We have contacts on the hospital board," one of the men explained, his voice calm but firm. "Our father's foundation funds several hospitals, including this one." The pieces fell into place, a puzzle she hadn't realized she was solving. The Mitchell Veterans Foundation, Robert Mitchell. The tallest man faced the guards again, his voice cold. "Perhaps you should inform Mr. Vincent that the chairman of his largest donor is a patient here, alive only because of Ms. Harper." The guards backed off, eager to avoid the confrontation, their retreat a silent acknowledgement of the power in the room. Only then did the tallest man introduce himself, extending his hand with a firm grip. "I'm Colonel David Mitchell. Robert Mitchell is our father." Emily blinked, confusion washing over her as the reality sank in. "These are my brothers, Ethan, Caleb, Ryan, and Lucas," David continued, gesturing to the men beside him, each one a mirror of their father's resolute gaze. "We flew in as soon as the hospital called." Ethan, the second tallest, stepped forward, his voice steady but emotional. "The doctors told us what you did, that our father wouldn't have made it without you." Emily sank into a chair, overwhelmed, her mind struggling to process the revelation. The Mitchell Foundation was a titan in healthcare, known for transforming veteran care and funneling millions into hospitals nationwide. She'd heard of their work, their advocacy, their fight for better care. And now, she was at the center of it, a pawn in a game she hadn't known she was playing. "We'd like to speak with Mr. Vincent," David said, his tone leaving no room for argument, his presence a force that commanded obedience. Within minutes, Vincent appeared, his usual arrogance replaced by nervous energy, his tie slightly askew as he forced a smile. A flicker of guilt crossed his face, so brief Emily almost missed it, but it was there, a crack in his cold facade. "Gentlemen, I had no idea Mr. Mitchell was your father. We're providing the best care. Save it," Caleb cut in, his voice a low growl, his eyes narrowing with anger. "We're more interested in why you fired the doctor who saved his life." Vincent paled, his hands fidgeting as he struggled to respond. "There are protocols, Ryan interjected, his voice steady but cutting. "Our foundation's grant to Pineview included funding for cardiosynth, the drug Ms. Harper used to save her patient. The action you fired her for." "I wasn't aware," Vincent stammered, his voice cracking, his confidence crumbling. "Clearly," David said icily, his gaze piercing. "We've also learned your cost-cutting measures have restricted medication access. Exactly what our grants were meant to prevent." Lucas, the youngest, spoke up, his voice quiet but firm. "Our father built this foundation on one principle. Medical decisions belong to doctors, not administrators with budgets." Vincent swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing as he struggled to respond. "Perhaps there's been a misunderstanding." "No misunderstanding," David replied, his voice a low rumble. "We'll speak with the board tomorrow. For now, we'd like to speak with Ms. Harper, if she's willing." All eyes turned to Emily, who felt like she was in a dream, the surreal weight of the moment pressing down on her. "Of course," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper, her heart racing with a mix of fear and hope. In a private room, away from Vincent's anxious hovering, the brothers shared more about their father, their voices a mix of pride and gratitude. Robert had founded the Mitchell Foundation after returning from Korea, dedicating his life to ensuring veterans receive proper care, a mission born from the trauma he'd endured on the battlefield. When he woke up briefly, David said, his voice softening, he told the nurses about an angel who kept him fighting on that road. He said you reminded him of what healthcare should be. Emily wiped away tears, the words a balm to her wounded spirit, a reminder of why she'd chosen this path. "I was just doing what felt right." "That's the point," Caleb said, his voice firm. In a system obsessed with rules and profits, you chose the patient, just like Dad always has. Ryan leaned forward, his voice steady. Our foundation needs someone like you, Emily. We've been looking for a director of care standards to oversee protocols in our partner hospitals, ensuring they balance efficiency with compassion. Emily stared at them, disbelief washing over her. You're offering me a job? You don't even know me. We know what matters, Lucas said with a smile, his eyes warm with sincerity. Dad's always been a good judge of character. Think about it, David added, his voice a quiet promise. The role comes with resources to make real change, not just fight the system, but fix it. Caleb paused, his voice softening, a distant look in his eyes as he shared a memory. Dad's why I became a cardiologist. I was 14 when he came home from Korea, broken but determined. He'd tell us stories of medics who saved his unit, heroes who inspired him to start the foundation. I remember one night, he sat us down, his hands shaking as he described a medic who dragged him to safety under gunfire, risking his own life. That's what medicine should be, he'd say. You're one of those heroes, Emily. The story struck a chord, tying Emily's actions to a legacy of heroism, a connection that made her feel seen in a way she hadn't in years. Ethan added, his voice thick with emotion. Dad always said the foundation was his way of giving back to the medics who saved him. I remember him showing us a photo of his unit, pointing out a young medic who'd carried him through a minefield. He kept that photo on his desk, a reminder of what he was fighting for. You're part of that legacy now, Emily. As they spoke, Emily felt a spark of hope she hadn't expected to feel again, a flicker of light in the darkness that had consumed her. What had started as the worst day of her career was becoming something new, something with potential she couldn't yet grasp. The next day, Emily stood at her apartment window, watching in disbelief as 5 luxury SUVs pulled up outside her modest building. Neighbors peeked through curtains as the Mitchell brothers stepped out, carrying folders and gift bags. Have you made a decision? David asked as they sat in her small living room, their polished presence a stark contrast to her threadbare furniture. Emily took a deep breath, surprising herself with her confidence. I have conditions. Your foundation's protocols need to balance standardization with clinical judgment. Every patient is unique. I want guidelines that reflect that. Ryan nodded. Dad will appreciate that. And I want a scholarship program, Emily continued, for doctors who go above and beyond for their patients, especially those who risk everything to do what's right. Done, David said without hesitation. Anything else? Emily's voice softened, her eyes shining with the weight of her dream. The first community clinic should be here, in this neighborhood. Too many families here can't afford care or navigate the system. Lucas smiled, his eyes warm with admiration. You've thought this through. It's been my dream for years, Emily admitted, her voice trembling with emotion. I just never had the means to make it happen. Now you do, David said, extending his hand, his voice a quiet promise. Welcome to the Mitchell Foundation, Emily. As they shook hands, Caleb handed her an envelope, his expression soft. This is from Dad. He insisted we deliver it. Inside was a handwritten, concurrent note on hospital stationery. Some angels don't wear halos. They wear stethoscopes. Thank you for reminding me why I started this fight. There's always a place for healers who put people first, Robert Mitchell. Beneath the note was a check, a signing bonus that would cover her rent for 2 years. He's recovering well, Ryan assured her, seeing her tears, his voice gentle. Already arguing with the nurses about his diet. He wants to meet you properly once he's discharged, David added, a smile tugging at his lips. He's eager to thank his angel in person. 3 months later, Emily stood beside Robert Mitchell at the groundbreaking ceremony for the new community clinic. Now fully recovered, Robert leaned on a cane adorned with his military insignia, his smile radiant as Emily addressed the crowd, which included Noah and Lily, now recipients of the first Mitchell Foundation Healthcare Scholarship. Healthcare isn't just about rules and systems, Emily said, her voice steady, resonating with the conviction of someone who'd lived every word. It's about seeing people at their most vulnerable and standing with them. Sometimes that means breaking rules, following your heart, and taking risks. Robert nodded, his eyes shining with pride, a silent acknowledgement of the bond they'd forged on that stormy night. This clinic, Emily continued, her voice swelling with hope, is a new beginning. one that blends modern medicine with the timeless power of human connection. She glanced at the Mitchell brothers in the front row, their faces a mirror of their father's pride. It proves that when one door slams shut, a whole world of opportunity can open. The crowd cheered as Robert cut the ribbon, launching a network of clinics that would grow under Emily's leadership, a legacy of compassion that would touch countless lives. Emily's story reminds us that true courage, standing up for what's right, even when it costs everything, can lead to rewards beyond our wildest dreams. What's the toughest choice you've ever made for someone else, and how did it change you? Share your story in the comments. We'd love to hear how you found light in the darkness, how you turned sacrifice into something greater. Later, as the celebration continued, Emily received a text from Sophie. Vincent resigned today. New administration is already revising those protocols you fought against. You've started a revolution. Emily smiled, watching Robert laugh with his sons and the first class of scholarship recipients, their joy a testament to the impact of her actions. From her lowest moment had come her greatest triumph, a chance to change lives on a scale she'd never imagined. Her journey is a testament to resilience, hope, and the power of compassion to transform the world, one life at a time. Don't miss out on more stories like Emily's, tales of ordinary heroes who changed the world. Subscribe to Daily Narrated Stories right now and turn on notifications so you never miss an inspiring journey. Next Thursday, meet a firefighter who ran into a burning building for a stranger. Will he make it out alive? Time's running out to join our community of dreamers and doers, so hit that subscribe button before it's too late. At Daily Narrated Stories, we're committed to bringing you life-changing narratives that uplift and inspire, because every story matters, and so do you.